Melanie was sitting in the cafe at the train station, absent-mindedly stirring her coffee with a spoon. She observed the people around her, most of whom were either arriving in the city or preparing to leave. The passengers likely assumed the same about Melanie, a young woman sitting alone at a table, waiting for her train. But things were not as they seemed. Danny had dropped Melanie off at the station, kissed her goodbye, and offered to wait for the train with her. "No, don't," Melanie smiled at him. "Otherwise, Nikki will be late for school." Danny nodded, gave his wife another goodbye hug, and left. He was confident that Melanie was embarking on a business trip on this sunny October morning. Melanie worked as an elementary school teacher. It was a responsible and challenging, yet enjoyable job. It was her parents who had encouraged her to pursue teaching after she finished school. "You have a way with children," her mother assured her. "Pedagogy is your calling. It's a wonderful profession," her father echoed, "noble, necessary, and perfect for women." Melanie agreed with them wholeheartedly and never regretted her choice. She had spent her childhood in a small regional town where everyone knew each other, and the streets were narrow and dusty. Melanie was a quiet, obedient girl, and it was a little scary to break away from the family, to go to study in the big and noisy city. But after finishing school, there was nowhere for her to go in her hometown. The only option was a construction college, which did not interest her at all. Melanie sighed as she reminisced about her parents. Her father had passed away a few years ago from a heart attack. At least he had the chance to meet his grandson. Melanie's mother also faced constant health issues, and Melanie was very anxious about her heart. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to a family, a young pretty woman and a man holding a 1-year-old baby in his arms. They reminded Melanie of her, Danny and Nikki. Not too long ago, they had been a happy, carefree family, satisfied with life. From the outside, it was like that, but only Melanie knew what was going on in her soul. Melanie loved Danny. It might not have been love at first sight, but there was certainly a strong attraction. When she first saw Danny, she felt drawn to him, despite not knowing him at all. And he didn't disappoint. After meeting him, Melanie realized that Danny was simply amazing. Sensitive, caring, attentive, kind, and incredibly talented. She always trusted him, even more than she trusted herself, and he never let her down. Or so she thought, until recently. When did things change? When did they take a wrong turn? It was hard to say now. It happened gradually, imperceptibly, amidst the whirlwind of endless responsibilities and worries. Melanie hadn't immediately noticed the change. It all started with business trips, or maybe even earlier. The frequency of Danny's business trips increased, and he became a bit absent-minded. Melanie sensed that something was occupying his thoughts, something intriguing and inspiring. Danny often seemed lost in his own world, with a mysterious smile playing on his lips. But who pays attention to such details after 8 years of marriage? Domestic responsibilities and routines have a way of dulling one's vigilance. Danny remained a loving and caring husband and father. He spent a lot of time with Nikki, fulfilled his household duties, and worked diligently. His salary constituted a significant portion of their family budget. He was a provider, a protector, a reliable presence in their lives. Melanie had grown accustomed to that. With that, she knew she would never be lost. Melanie knew that Danny loved her. He still did. Sometimes he would look at her with such affection that her heart would instantly warm. He constantly complimented her, gave her gifts for no reason, and took care of her. Melanie was fully aware of how fortunate she was. She had witnessed the husbands of her friends and acquaintances, many of whom believed that household duties and chores should fall solely on their wives. Some of them drank, some cheated, and some systematically drained the life out of their partners. When women vented about their husbands, Melanie felt genuinely happy that her relationship with Danny was totally different. Danny was not just a beloved friend to Melanie, but also a pillar of support and hope. They shared everything with each other, and Melanie had grown accustomed to this way of life. She rightly believed that her own merit played a role in maintaining such a relationship. But there were no perfect husbands. Corinne, Melanie's friend and colleague, would shake her head. They often spent their breaks in the school cafeteria discussing various topics. Corinne was an erudite, cheerful and energetic woman. Melanie enjoyed spending time with her. However, Corinne had long ago become disillusioned with men. She once had a love of her life. In her second year of studies, she fell head over heels for a guy she met on the street. He approached her, showered her with compliments and invited her for a walk. And sensible and cautious Corinne agreed almost immediately. This man stunned her with his assertiveness and confidence. Corinne experienced a whirlwind romance. She was hypnotized by him, closing her eyes to many things, like the fact that he was significantly older and shared very little about himself. Corinne only knew that he was in the city temporarily, having come from the capital. He pledged eternal love, made plans for the future, so to say. He knew how to captivate an inexperienced girl. He painted an image of a reliable and responsible man, charming her with courtship, flowers and compliments. Of course, happiness was short-lived. The fiancé from the capital vanished as suddenly as he appeared. He stopped answering her calls, and for a while Corinne was worried, thinking that something bad might have happened to him. Then she went to his hotel and discovered that he had checked out, called a taxi to the airport and left. Corinne understood everything at that moment, but she still held on to hope, believing that urgent circumstances had arisen. He would call again. He would come back. He knew how to find her. It couldn't be all a lie. Not with those adoring eyes and the promises of a future. It was unthinkable. However, the love of her life never reappeared. Corinne suffered greatly. She lost her appetite, didn't want to eat, and didn't want to talk to anyone. The girl felt shattered, betrayed, and believed that nothing good would ever happen in her life again. A couple of months later, Corinne realized that she had an even bigger problem. She was pregnant. The news was a real shock and served as a wake-up call for her. It brought her back to reality in a way, and so Corinne became a single mother. She was living with her mother and father, who helped her raise her daughter. The entire family adored the little girl. Ronnie turned out to be a real beauty. She takes after her father. Corinne smiled as she looked at her daughter. He was also handsome, blonde with emerald eyes. At least I'm grateful of him for her. Melanie knew Corinne's story and understood why she held such a negative view of men in general. To her it seemed as if every man was just like her daughter's father, a cheater, a philanderer, someone who steals the joy out of the life of any woman. There was no point in arguing with her. Everyone cheats. Absolutely everyone, Corinne assured her friend. It's in men's nature. You can't escape it. Melanie argued with a smile. I don't know. I guess not everyone is after all. But Corinne didn't give up and replied, and those men who do not cheat, they just not yet found with whom. But I trust Danny, said Melanie, looking at her friend reproachfully. And for nothing. I wouldn't get too optimistic about him. They're all unreliable. Melanie tried not to get into such conversations with her friend, but sometimes it worked itself out. Melanie felt sorry for Corinne. She had been unlucky in her youth. She had fallen for a cheater, and now she was like this. Nothing would change her mind. Of all the men who existed in the world, her friend recognized and loved only two, her father and Melanie's son, whose godmother she was. The others she considered to be potential cheats and traitors. Sometimes Corinne and Melanie would argue about Danny. Well, he can't be so perfect. Corinne shook her head. You just don't notice many things, I guess. Or you think it's the norm. No, we both trust each other. He's my closest person. Look at us. Maybe this will help you rethink your views. Maybe you should try meeting someone too. No, thanks. Been there, done that. Melanie sighed. Corinne was an attractive young woman, and Melanie thought it was a pity that she was missing the opportunity to be loved. She even advised her to consult a psychologist to work through the trauma she had received several years ago, but Corinne flatly refused. Once, after a birthday celebration, the friends returned home in a cab, and Corinne, who had consumed a large amount of alcoholic beverages, suddenly opened up to Melanie. After him, all other men seem grey to me. No one reaches him, no one at all. Can you imagine? He screwed me, cheated me, used me, and I still think he's perfect. I'm an idiot, aren't I?" After this conversation, many things became clearer to Melanie. It happened Corinne still had feelings for the father of her daughter, and Ronnie, who looked so much like him, didn't let her mother forget about him. In general, it was Corinne who first gave Melanie this version that Danny had a mistress somewhere on the side. They were shopping together, then getting the children ready for school. Both of them were a little sad that the long-awaited summer was over so quickly. Soon lessons would begin again, not only for Ronnie and Nikki, but also for their mother teachers. Early rises, compulsory chores, the cycle of urgent matters. Danny is going away on a business trip again. Melanie shared the news with her friend. "He's been travelling a lot." Corinne shook her head and looked attentively at Melanie. "Their law firm has expanded in geography," Melanie sighed. She didn't like that Danny was away from home so often now, but work was work. "So? Do they pay more?" Melanie wondered. Her friend's question caught her off guard. "No, they're paying Danny less." The woman shook her head negatively. Corinne immediately perked up. "Don't you think it's suspicious?" Melanie stopped and looked closely into Corinne's eyes. "No? Why should it?" "Well, how could it be? Constant business trips, salary decreased suddenly out of the blue. It's not that much of a pay cut. It's just that the company is expanding. They need funds for development. It's just a temporary hardship." "Danny tells you that, right? And you believe him?" Melanie nodded in agreement. Her friend's word made her finally realise that Danny had been acting differently lately. The pensive look on his face, the occasional smile, the secret calls, and the mysterious correspondence with someone. It all seemed like Danny was keeping something from her. A specific incident came to mind. Melanie walked into the bedroom and found Danny sitting at his laptop. As soon as he heard her footsteps, he abruptly closed the lid. Another time, Danny's cell phone rang and Melanie picked it up to give it to him, but he quickly entered the room, snatched the phone from her hands, and answered the call behind a closed door. Moreover, he began going on numerous business trips. "I would check his cell phone if I were you," Corinne advised, shaking her head. "I'm really worried about you. I'm scared that you'll experience the same pain I once did. You might even feel worse. You've been together for so many years, and they're all the same. Men." That conversation with Corinne triggered a doubt in Melanie's mind. She started looking at Danny differently and was not comfortable with this change in their relationship. However, the trust they once had was gone. One day, her husband went to the bathroom and left his phone on the bedside table. It was unusual because he always carried his phone with him, as if afraid of missing an important call. Melanie struggled with her doubts. Yes, it wasn't appropriate to go through someone else's phone, but she had a valid reason to do so. Feeling almost like a criminal, she ran her fingers over the screen, only to discover that it was password protected. This was news to her. However, Melanie didn't notice any coldness from him in their relationship. He still hugged and kissed her before going to work, still took care of her. However, it was clear that something was occupying his mind. Something or someone. Melanie knew her husband well enough to see it. Was it really a mistress? The thought was sharp, unpleasant and hurtful. Melanie didn't want to believe that Danny was capable of doing that to her. Why would he? Everything had always been fine between them. Maybe Corinne is right. Maybe men aren't capable of fidelity, even the best of them. Melanie tried to dismiss the exhausting thought. No, it's probably because of a stressful job. His company is expanding and there is a lot of work. Business trips became more frequent, and Danny is exhausted and more taciturn. But he still loves me and our son. That's evident. However, Danny's thoughtful and almost affectionate gaze didn't fit into any of the explanations, because he wasn't looking at her during those moments. Being a lawyer had never brought him so much joy as well. Danny had only pursued a career in law because his parents had pushed him into it when he hadn't decided at the end of school, but it wasn't a serious choice, and Danny understood that perfectly well. However, Danny turned out to be a good lawyer. He had a way with words and quick thinking. He excelled in his profession. He did everything for his family, ensuring that his wife and son lacked nothing. Melanie remembered a difficult choice that Danny had to make, and she deeply appreciated how he handled it. It was a moment when Danny had proven himself and, in a way, sacrificed his dream for her. And after everything they had been through, Melanie couldn't believe he had a mistress. But all the evidence pointed in that direction. Corinne's constant talk about unfaithful men only fueled her doubts further. One day in late September, Melanie ran into Peter, Danny's old friend and colleague at the mall. They both worked in the same law firm, but in different departments. "Hi, you look great," Peter smiled, seeing an old acquaintance. "Hi, long time no see. How's it going?" "It's all right, the usual. Working, the talkative Peter replied. "Yes, your work is certainly off the charts now." Melanie shook her head. "Your company is expanding, isn't it?" Melanie noticed a brief moment of astonishment on Peter's face. Apparently, he had never heard of any expansion, but he quickly composed himself. "Expansion," Peter said in a less confident tone. "Yes, expansion. There's a lot of work." He smiled radiantly at Melanie and tried to go away, but Melanie was determined not to let him go. She already realized that her husband's stories about the changes in the company were a lie. Peter's reaction spoke volumes. "Wait, do you also go on business trips often, like Danny?" Peter froze, unsure of how to answer Melanie without betraying his friend. It was quite noticeable. His face reflected deep contemplation. Then he nodded and, citing pressing matters, hurried away. But his behaviour revealed a lot to Melanie. Of course, there were no business trips. Danny fabricated these trips to what? To spend time with his mistress? Melanie started to observe her husband more closely. She didn't like this new role of being a detective, but what choice did she have? She needed evidence before she could broach such topics with her husband. Melanie confided in Corinne about her worries. Who else? Certainly not her mother, who had a heart condition. Melanie had no one else close to her. "It's not surprising," her friend shrugged. "You're not the first and you won't be the last. It's quite common. I've told you that." "Corinne, that's not what I'm talking about right now. I'm well aware of your views on men, believe me. Better give me advice. How to gather proof." "Okay, since you desperately need proof," Corinne pondered, "since you absolutely need it, I have a plan. I think it could work." "Go on, tell me," Melanie asked. And Corinne did. Melanie, in her current state, would hardly have thought of such a thing. "You have to disappear from the city. Think of something. Say you have to urgently visit your mother, or make up another excuse. But Danny must be convinced that you're out of town and that you'll be gone for a few days. He'll have the apartment all to himself, you know? Get a cheap camera and install it in the stairwell. And watch. If there are any mistresses, they'll take advantage of your absence. He'll bring her home, definitely, when Nikki is at school. Then you'll have the proof you need." "You've probably seen too many movies," Melanie grinned sadly. She still couldn't believe that she was seriously discussing such a crazy plan. "Well, if you don't like it, make it up yourself," said Corinne, who was slightly offended. "I just want to help you, from the bottom of my heart, and you... Well, don't take offence. It's just that it's all kind of weird. Well, I have to go now." Melanie didn't want to stay in her friend's company any longer. Back at home, Melanie thought over her friend's plan in a quiet atmosphere and concluded that it was a good way to gather proof of Danny's infidelity. Finally, Melanie ordered a camera from the marketplace. She carefully chose one with a good resolution and the ability to record for hours without needing to be recharged. It was a significant expense, but she had no choice. She also had to figure out how to install the camera. In the past, Danny had always handled all technical issues, but now Melanie couldn't ask him for help. She had to do it herself. However, finally everything was ready. It was time to move on the next part of the plan. Melanie took time off from work and told Danny that she was being sent on a business trip. It was payback time. Danny had lied to her about his business trips, and now she was returning the favour. "You're going on a business trip?" Danny was surprised. "You're an elementary school teacher. Why would you need a business trip?" "It's for professional development," Melanie shrugged. "I don't want to go, but the principal insists." "Well, if it's necessary," Danny smiled. "You must be the most promising teacher if they're sending you." "I was thinking that maybe Nicky should go to his mother or your parents." Melanie hoped Danny would agree, as it would give him complete control over the apartment for a few days. "No, why would he miss school? We'll manage, we're not kids," Danny smiled. "Well, you've been working so hard lately." "It's okay, I'll take a break for a few days." Melanie planned to spend her fictitious business trip at their family's summer house, enjoying peace and solitude. During the summer, they would visit the summer house to escape civilization and enjoy the silence. They would swim in the pool, sunbathe, and have barbecues. It was their oasis for summer vacations, enjoying each other's company. And now the summer house would become a temporary refuge for Melanie, who arranged a surveillance of her husband, and supported each other in difficult moments. But now her friend's joy irritated Melanie, as if she was saying with her whole appearance, "I was right." Perhaps Corinne was pleased, but not that her friend was in a difficult situation. The woman simply received another proof of the correctness of her point of view. All men are cheaters, even the best of them. Danny himself accompanied his wife to the station and then went home to ensure Nicky would be on time for school. He was confident that within half an hour his wife would board the train to the capital. But Melanie had different plans altogether. First, she wanted to wander around the city alone, without any specific destination. She needed time to reflect and organise her thoughts, simply to take a walk. Walking always had a calming effect on her. Later in the afternoon, she intended to go to the bus station, from where the buses to their summer house departed. First, Melanie headed to the Embankment, the most beautiful place in their city. Whitewashed railings, clean sidewalks, a wide and leisurely river, with the sun's reflections playing so beautifully on its surface. And fresh air. Melanie had countless memories associated with this place. It was here where Danny had kissed her for the first time. Melanie was taken, surprised, and almost felt like the ground was slipping from beneath her feet. She never imagined that Danny could be interested in her. There were always plenty of attractive girls around, and she simply couldn't compete with them. Melanie used to be a lively girl, but everything changed during adolescence. She suddenly grew taller, became thin and awkward. She also developed acne on her face. The girl couldn't look at herself in the mirror and would get upset, even cry. She thought she was the ugliest girl in her class. Her classmates only reinforced this belief. Boys didn't pay attention to Melanie, and some girls, not all of them, made hurtful jokes about her. In general, Melanie became quiet, modest, and lacked confidence. However, she always excelled academically and obeyed her parents. Time went by, and the teenage acne disappeared. Melanie transformed into a very attractive young woman, but she remained the same insecure, quiet, and unassuming girl. Her friends were also the same. Melanie vividly remembered that period of her life. She was about to move to another city, a big, bustling and vibrant one. Melanie, accustomed to a comfortable life under her parents' care, felt frightened by the upcoming changes, but she understood that it was necessary. Her parents encouraged her to be a teacher, and Melanie didn't object. She didn't have her own thoughts about her future anyway, and a teacher was a respectable profession. Melanie still remembered how her parents first brought her to the city to show her the apartment she would live in during her studies. She could have arranged for a dormitory since she wasn't a local, but her father believed that having a separate apartment would be safer. A dormitory is for partying, not for studying. Melanie won't be able to focus on her studies there, the man reasoned. Besides, I can afford to rent a separate apartment for my only daughter. And so Melanie embarked on an entirely different life, independent, fulfilling, and at times challenging. She had to adapt to everything, absolutely everything. She had to wake up on her own, prepare her own breakfasts and dinners, take the bus to the college, and adjust to a whole new way of studying. Initially, the multitude of changes overwhelmed Melanie and plunged her into a state of depression. She longed to go back in time and be her parents' little girl again. But there was no turning back, and Melanie fully grasped that fact. She made new friends, such as Anita. Anita came from a remote town to the city, and unlike Melanie, she embraced the sudden freedom wholeheartedly. Anita lived in a dormitory, often skipped classes, and knew where to find entertainment in the city. She and Melanie grew close, perhaps because both of them were newcomers. Sometimes Anita even stayed overnight at Melanie's place when she got caught up in some party in the city for too long. Anita told Melanie about her adventures, and she listened interestedly. The carefree and adventurous Anita appeared to be the girl like the protagonist of a thrilling series about youth. Anita often invited Melanie to join her, but the girl always declined. She had to focus on preparing for exams and writing a term paper. College was different from school, and Melanie had to put in effort. Studying was her top priority, which Anita often teased her about. "You're missing out on the best years of your life," she would say, shaking her head. "You're young and beautiful, but you spend all your time buried in textbooks within these four walls. Come to the club with me." "But we have classes tomorrow morning, don't we?" "It's just a history of pedagogy. We still have plenty of time before exams. Let's go out." However, Melanie stood her ground, and only after passing the exams, Anita managed to persuade her friend to go to the club. "Finally, I get to take you out," she exclaimed. "But first you need to get ready. You don't even have the right clothes." Anita had the right clothes. She dragged Melanie to her dormitory and made her try on various clothes. They were wholly different from Melanie's style. Tight, ripped jeans, belly-revealing tops, and little dresses embroidered with rhinestones. Anita admired Melanie, but she felt improper in these clothes. "You just don't get it," Anita sighed when Melanie rejected another outfit idea. "Fine, wear whatever you want." And so Melanie went in her usual jeans and t-shirt. She tied her hair up in a high ponytail, and she did apply makeup at Anita's insistence. She also wore her friend's earrings. However, after a couple of hours, Melanie regretted not dressing more brightly and spectacularly. Maybe then he would have noticed her. Anita brought Melanie to the club. With confidence, she passed the guards and entered the spacious hall. Melanie soon realized that her friend was a regular here. People approached Anita every now and then to say hello. They exchanged a few words and smiled at each other. Anita felt right at home, but Melanie felt a little uncomfortable in this unfamiliar environment, even though she enjoyed being there. The club was filled with lively music. People danced to the beat on the dance floor. There were people of different ages with both flamboyant and inconspicuous styles. Melanie paused for a moment, taking in the diverse crowd. It was interesting, but Anita was already pulling her further. "Why are you just standing there? Come on, they're waiting for us." She led Melanie up a narrow staircase, and they found themselves on a platform overlooking the dance floor. The platform was filled with tables and cosy sofas and armchairs. From there they had a clear view of the dance floor. Anita's buddies were already greeting her from one of the tables. They looked vibrant. The guys were wearing tight jeans and leather trench coats, and the girls seemed more ordinary in comparison with them. Melanie was initially surprised but then she noticed a guitar leaning against the back of a chair. Apparently, these were Anita's friends, who had recently formed a rock band. Anita had told Melanie about them. They seemed very talented, composing their own music and lyrics. "This is my friend, Melanie," Anita shouted above the music, introducing Melanie. For a moment, everyone's attention shifted to Melanie. Out of habit, she felt embarrassed. "Hi, nice to meet you," she replied. Everyone greeted Melanie and went back to discussing music. Feeling more at ease, the girl scolded herself for being shy and tried her best to relax and act as freely as the others. They were discussing the upcoming performance, but the soloist was still missing. Everyone jokingly cursed someone named Danny, and then he suddenly appeared. Danny, a guy with slightly dishevelled dark hair, was wearing faded jeans and a baggy t-shirt. His style clearly set him apart from his comrades. He had a cheerful look with a slightly mischievous squint and a charming smile. Just moments ago, everyone was scolding him, but upon seeing the latecomer, they immediately broke into smiles. "Well, at last," grumbled one of the guys. "Our performance is in 15 minutes. "You know, I never let you down." Danny clapped him on the shoulder, then noticed the unfamiliar girl and smiled radiantly. His smile revealed 2 dimples on his cheeks, which captivated Melanie. She realized that she had been missing something at that very moment. "Who is this beautiful stranger among us?" Danny asked. "That's Melanie, my friend. I told you about her." Anita introduced her friend. Danny gallantly and gently took Melanie's hand and kissed it. It was clearly a playful gesture, causing some laughter. Danny seemed to be known in this group as a funny man and a leader, but that kiss meant a lot to Melanie. Danny's touch made her dizzy and almost lifted her off the ground. Melanie was still in a mild shock when the musicians suddenly picked up their guitars and rushed down the stairs. "Is everything all right?" Anita smiled at the confused Melanie. "Has Danny impressed you like that?" Melanie did not deny it and nodded in agreement. "It happens. He's quite charismatic." And then the band, led by Danny, took the stage. The guys gave it their all and the crowd cheered them on. They were real stars, even if only locally. Melanie felt that their songs were just as good as those of the musicians seen on TV. This group had a great future ahead. The music was catchy and meaningful, with profound lyrics. The guys sang about love, friendship and injustice. Every word resonated in Melanie's heart, and it seemed the audience felt the same. The crowd in front of the stage sang along, danced, and had a blast. The guys knew how to captivate an audience. Melanie's attention was mainly focused on Danny. He was simultaneously rugged and tender, strong and energetic. Sometimes he smiled, but his eyes remained serious. Melanie couldn't take her eyes off him. "They're cool guys. I met them a while back when I was at a disco at a law school. By the way, they're future lawyers." "I see," Melanie managed to say. Something indescribable was happening to her. No other man had ever made such an impression on her. And there she was, watching Danny, feeling more and more drawn to him, like a magnet. The guys sang a few more songs and returned to the table. The evening continued as normal. Danny talked and joked with his friends and the girls. He paid little attention to Melanie, as he was still excited from the performance and success. From time to time, unfamiliar girls would approach Danny to ask him to dance or have a chat. They were all stunning, tall, slender, vibrant, and very confident. Melanie quickly realized that she didn't stand a chance with Danny. He was a local star with countless admirers, and she felt like a grey mouse in comparison. She should have listened to Anita and dressed more attractively. Sitting there in jeans and a t-shirt, she felt invisible. Danny then somehow disappeared imperceptibly. He left with someone to go out further. The evening lost all its charm for Melanie. She called a cab and went home, leaving Anita with her friends. Since then, Melanie often thought about Danny, remembering his eyes and his smile. Melanie carefully hid her feelings from Anita, but her friend noticed and understood everything. Anita was perceptive and sensitive. Sometimes she purposely invited Melanie to the club when she knew Danny and his group would be there. Melanie and Danny would often discuss movies and news, discovering that they had similar views on many issues. Sometimes Danny would put his arm around her shoulders in a friendly manner, melting Melanie's heart like ice cream in the sun. but he was always surrounded by beautiful nymphs and admirers. Sometimes he would look at them in a way that made Melanie jealous and desperate. She wished Danny would look at her with the same admiration. "Danny is a heartbreaker," Anita once said. "I'm not surprised at all. The girls run after him." "Is he seeing someone?" Melanie asked. "No, nothing serious," Anita replied. "He's too busy with his music, his band and his studies. He's not in a serious relationship, that's for sure." Those words brought Melanie some comfort, but deep down it didn't matter to her whether Danny's heart was free or not. After all, he would never see her the way he saw those beauties. He only saw her as a friend, a good conversationalist. Yet Melanie couldn't help but feel jealous and envious whenever Danny paid attention to his numerous admirers. She had never felt such aggression before. Sometimes she wanted to grab one of those beauties by the hair and throw her down the stairs, fueled by her jealousy. Only Anita seemed to notice. "Control yourself, honey," Anita whispered with a smile, sometimes right into Melanie's ear. "Danny doesn't need her anyway. It's just a passing fancy for inspiration." Anita was observant and wise beyond her years. She noticed everything and always drew the right conclusions. Melanie trusted her completely. It was a pity that their paths diverged after graduation. Bright Anita left to seek happiness in another city. At first, they would still correspond occasionally, but then everything went quiet. That's just how life goes. A year had passed since Melanie met Danny. They had become good friends, and Melanie's life had changed significantly. Her days used to revolve around studying, but now she discovered a whole new world, new acquaintances, interesting conversations, and her first love. Although her feelings for Danny were unrequited, they enriched her, inspired her, and filled her with a special energy that made her stronger. Danny dedicated himself to studying, rehearsing, and performing with his band at various places in the city. His band was becoming more and more popular, and they were being invited to host corporate parties and birthdays. The garage band was gaining fame, and their earnings were growing. All of these guys, they were talented and sincere. Their songs were characterized by deep meaning and touched the hearts of listeners. The rousing melodies made them move to the beat of the music, and all this contributed to their success. Danny attended music school long ago. He amusingly recounted how much he hated that institution. The boring lessons of solfeggio and music literature, along with the lack of choice in music, strict and hostile teachers, exams, and the constant practice almost completely discouraged the talented boy's desire to pursue music. Fortunately, his grandmother influenced Danny's parents, and they allowed him to leave the music school. And that's when Danny started doing what he really liked. He began writing his own lyrics and music. His first listeners were the neighborhood boys and girls. Later his music was appreciated in a local cafe, where he found his first moment of fame in front of truckers enjoying their steak. They applauded him for a long time and asked him to play more. That welcoming inspired the young musician. And then, Danny, finishing school, and his parents suggested that he should go to the city to study law. Danny was a smart guy, and his studies always came easy to him. However, he had no particular preference in terms of a professional plan. Of course, he would like to become a famous guitarist or singer, create a band and make millions. But Danny understood perfectly well that these were just dreams, and the chances of them becoming true were minimal. In his small town, he was a rising star, but in the city there were probably countless others like him. The competition was so fierce that he shouldn't even hope. After enrolling in law school, Danny got acquainted with guys who, like himself, loved music and knew how to create it. That's how their band was born. The guys decided to give it a try. Well, what did they have to lose? Initially, the buddies just wanted to have fun, and they didn't even think about performances and fame. They rehearsed in the garage of one of the guys. Then they played at a festive event at their law school. Among the audience happened to be the owner of a local bar, who invited the guys to perform for money, albeit a small amount. That's how it all started. The guys wrote new songs and performed them in clubs and bars. They also regularly posted their new songs on a social media. Their songs were often downloaded. Soon the band became known far beyond the city. They were even invited to clubs in the capital a couple of times, and then their band had their first real tour. What was initially created as entertainment became something more serious and impressive. This inspired and encouraged the guys. Melanie was sincerely happy for them. However, the growing popularity of the group meant that Danny was turning into an idol for young girls. It was inevitable that one day one of them would steal his heart. Thinking about that was very hard for Melanie. It was a warm May evening. The lessons were almost behind, the exams were not happening too soon, and Melanie had some time to have some fun and relax. She decided to go to the club with Anita, especially since Danny's band was going to play there that night. Melanie was looking forward to talking to Danny again. It was such happiness. But throughout the evening, Melanie was bothered by a drunken man in his 40s who stared at her, made inappropriate compliments, and even tried to hug her. He was an intrusive and very unpleasant admirer. Despite her attempts to stay away from him, he always found her and started a conversation. He boasted about just returning from a business trip abroad and having a lot of money. Apparently, he thought this fact would impress Melanie. He assured her that he had never seen such a beautiful girl and offered to go for a walk and spend pleasant time together. Although the man didn't do anything explicitly wrong, his persistence was a little frightening. Melanie approached Anita and shared her problem. The girl only laughed and said, "Well, now you have broken another heart on your account. You are a truly treacherous woman. I would even say fatal." Only Melanie was not desiring jokes. She found out that Danny and his band would not stay at the club after the performance. They had a tour in another region and an early morning flight. Melanie was almost in tears. She hadn't seen Danny for over 2 weeks and missed him. And there he was. After the band played their last song, the musicians bowed and went backstage. That was it. Now Melanie wouldn't see Danny for a long time. "I have to go," Melanie sighed. "Are you serious? The evening is just beginning. My classmates will come up. It will be fun. Stay." "My head hurts." "Well, suit yourself." Anita shrugged. Melanie called a cab and went outside to wait for the car. It was very late. Muffled music was coming from the club. Melanie found herself completely alone on the street. And suddenly the door swung open, and next to Melanie stood the same intrusive beau who had been keeping her in suspense all evening. Now he was even more obnoxious. "Oh, my queen!" the man clapped. He came quite close to her, showering her with the odour of alcohol and cigarette fumes. Melanie felt alarmed, and when the man hugged her around the waist, the girl was really scared. This man drank a lot, but he was strong, incredibly strong. He could do anything he wanted to her right now, and there was no one around. Calling for help would be pointless, of course. "Get away!" Melanie sharply pushed him away. She must not show that he had frightened her. "And you are impertinent." The man smiled even wider and moved toward Melanie again. "I love that kind." Melanie realized she had to run. She turned around and rushed away, but the man caught up with her quickly. He grabbed her arm, firm and determined, his eyes burning with malicious fire. He dragged Melanie to a parked car. It must have been his car. Melanie fought back, but without any effect on the situation. Terror gripped her body. And then a real miracle happened. Melanie didn't even realize what was happening. The man suddenly loosened his grip, and shortly he was on the ground. He was overpowered by a young guy in a black leather jacket. "Melanie!" he exclaimed in surprise, glancing at Melanie. It was Stephen, the guitarist of the band. Melanie was ready to kiss her saviour at that moment. The man grunted, wriggling on the ground, pressed down by Stephen's knee. It wasn't so easy for him to cope with a sturdy guy as with a fragile girl. A few seconds later, others, including Danny, arrived at the scene. Melanie had seen him after all, albeit under such strange circumstances. "We noticed how this scumbag drags the girl to his car, but we didn't think it was you," Stephen said. "Are you okay?" Danny put his hand on her shoulder and looked into her eyes. Feeling the warmth of his palm, she smiled. "I'm fine," she admitted, and it was true. Scared, I guess. A little bit, Melanie nodded, and only then did she begin to feel a wave of fear wash over her. It slowly dawned on her what misfortune she had just escaped. At this moment, her cab pulled up. "That's after me. I have to go home," she stammered. Danny then wrapped his warm, safe arms around her, trying to calm her trembling. Melanie pressed against him, taking in his scent. The man who had tried to drag her into his car was now wriggling on the ground, and she felt over the moon. "You can't be alone right now." Danny shook his head and turned to his friends. "I'll walk her out." "What about this one?" Stephen asked, pointing at the man still lying in the mud. "Leave him alone. He can't stand on his feet anymore. Let him lie there." Danny waved his hand. And then they were in a cab. Danny held Melanie in his strong arms, stroking her back and shoulders, saying reassuring and soothing words. He was so reliable, so kind. Melanie consciously savoured the wonderful moment. She wished this journey could be longer, but unfortunately her rented apartment was not very far from the club. "Do you really want to go home now?" Danny asked when the car stopped at the right entrance. Melanie shook her head negatively, not wanting to go home at all. "To the embankment," Danny commanded the driver, and then turned to Melanie. "You don't mind walking a little, do you? You shouldn't be alone right now." At that moment, Melanie thanked fate for sending this drunken admirer. If it hadn't been for him, Danny wouldn't have asked her to walk along the night embankment. They walked silently along the river, illuminated by lanterns, holding hands like two lovers, smiling at each other from time to time. It was a moment of incredible unity. Melanie realised more and more clearly that Danny was the closest and dearest person to her. She knew she would remember every second of this walk for the rest of her life. And then something completely unexpected happened. Danny stopped and turned Melanie towards him by her shoulders. Can I kiss you?" Danny asked, looking directly into her eyes. He was serious and clearly worried, which was unusual for him. It seemed to Melanie that she had misheard. Just to be certain, she nodded affirmatively, and Danny kissed her. They stood on the night embankment, kissing in the light of lanterns, surrounded by silence and no one around. It all felt too fantastic and unreal. Then they had a long conversation, with Danny doing most of the talking while Melanie listened and smiled, unable to believe that this was happening to her. "I realised a long time ago that you're my soulmate." Danny gently put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "This has never happened to me before. At first I just enjoyed talking to you. I looked at you and thought, what a good, smart, sensitive, kind girl. And then suddenly I realised I get bored when I don't see you for a long time, and I miss you." This was a revelation to Danny. Although he had met girls and had brief affairs, none of them evoked as much feeling and emotion in him as Melanie, a modest girl from their group of friends. "I realised that there is no one else like you at all. I know many girls, but they're different. I always feel so good with you, so at ease. You're special." These confessions made Melanie dizzy. Was all this really happening to her? Danny said such words that made her want to cry and laugh at the same time. Melanie didn't know what to say in response. All words seemed insufficiently expressive. Instead, she clung to Danny's chest, and he stroked her head like a kitten and smiled. From that moment on, they were a couple. Not everything, of course, was always smooth between Melanie and Danny. They got to know each other better, adjusted to each other, and learned to be together. But overall, next to him, Melanie felt entirely different. Loved, beautiful, protected, and she liked this feeling very much. Danny took care of her. His love was expressed through care and support. They were almost the same age, but he behaved as if he were much older, taking responsibility and solving important matters. For a long time, Melanie couldn't believe that Danny was really with her now. It was incredible, but Anita, as it turned out, had anticipated this outcome. "I saw the way Danny was looking at you. I thought I maybe was imagining things, but it turned out to be true. I'm happy for you." "I wonder why I didn't notice anything," Melanie wondered. "You're not particularly observant when it comes to small things at all," Anita grinned, and he concealed his feelings carefully. "Not particularly observant when it comes to details." These words from Anita, spoken many years ago, now suddenly resurfaced in Melanie's mind. Her friend was right. Back then, Melanie hadn't noticed anything, and now she was blind the same way. As Melanie walked past the city fountain, she couldn't help but think about the cafe on the opposite, where she and Danny had spent a lot of time, laughing, kissing, and enjoying their youth in each other's company. The world seemed bright, simple and warm then, because they had each other. Danny spoke passionately about his plans for the band. Music fascinated him more and more. His eyes gleamed as he discussed with Melanie the prospects of his rock band. It was his brainchild, with which he associated great hopes. Melanie was glad that her beloved had such a passion that filled him with energy and propelled him forward. She believed he would truly become a star. Danny was not going to work as a lawyer. He considered it boring and monotonous, and Melanie agreed. She saw Danny as a creative person who had a passion for music and desired to become a successful rock musician. The thought of Danny in a traditional office, wearing a white shirt and classic pants, seemed unimaginable. However, everything changed when an unexpected event occurred. Danny and Melanie were both in the midst of graduating from college, dealing with diplomas, internships, exams and job searches. And it happened that Danny received a truly intriguing offer that you couldn't refuse. It was a fateful opportunity. The band's clips on the internet had caught the attention of a renowned producer. He had personally researched the lead singer of the band, found his contacts, and one day he called Danny. At first, Danny couldn't believe what was happening. He received an offer to start a new band with his participation. Moreover, everything would be overseen by a man who often appeared in the press. Many talented singers discovered by him subsequently gave concerts at thousands of venues across the country, received substantial fees and went on tours. This was precisely what Danny had dreamed of, and he was deserving of such an opportunity. Melanie knew this undoubtedly. "You've worked towards this for so long," she said. "It's wonderful. I know you will succeed. Your songs are special, and you are incredibly talented." Danny smiled and replied, "That's all true, but you see, I'm the only one being invited. What about the guys? Our band was created thanks to their efforts. We worked together and put in a lot of hard work, and now this is happening. If I leave, the band will fall apart." Yes, the choice he faced was much more difficult than it seemed at first glance. "I understand. However, you have to move forward. Think about it. If you become famous and influential, you can help your bandmates later." Danny acknowledged her words, but his hesitation was evident. Melanie couldn't bear to see her beloved miss out on such a chance, due to moral torment. So she turned to Stephen, a permanent member of their band. He was an honest and sincere guy without any hidden agendas. She explained the situation to Stephen, and although he initially came to terms with the end of their band, with a sad shake of his head, he did what Melanie had hoped for. It was Stephen who convinced Danny that he should by no means decline this opportunity. After the conversation with the members of the band, Danny felt much better. They all unanimously persuaded him to accept the offer, demonstrating true friendship without a trace of envy or reproach. Melanie realized that she and Danny would see each other less frequently now. He would have to live and work in another city, and she would also relocate there to be closer to him. Danny assured her that he would resolve the housing issue as soon as possible, although not immediately. Initially, he would be living with the other band members in a country house, rehearsing from morning until evening and getting acquainted with one another. And Danny was ready to temporarily forget about everything else and devote himself solely to his passion for music, working tirelessly from dawn until dusk. Melanie was thrilled for her beloved, but she also had concerns. It would be a true test for their relationship. They would not be able to see each other for some time, and there were many beautiful and talented girls in the capital. However, Melanie tried to chase away anxious thoughts. Danny was already ready to set out to fulfill his dream. The suitcases were packed and even the tickets were in hand. And then this happened. At first, Melanie didn't even want to take a pregnancy test, thinking it was just a delay, as it happened to her frequently. However, one morning, she suddenly felt nauseous and spent half an hour in the bathroom feeling sick to her stomach. Was it food poisoning? But the next morning, the same symptoms occurred again. It became impossible for Melanie to ignore these signs. Melanie immediately went to the nearest drugstore, bought a test, and 50 minutes later, blinking her eyes confusedly, looked at the 2 clear stripes on the test. Her initial emotion was joy. She and Danny were going to have a baby. What happiness! They were too young, but that was all right. They would figure things out. And then Melanie suddenly thought about the fact that Danny was flying to his new life next week. He wouldn't be around. He wouldn't help with the child. So what to do now? That evening, Melanie and Danny were walking through the city. Danny held her hand and shared his impressions of what was happening to him. Goosebumps on my back. I feel like the protagonist in a movie about the rise of a star. Danny was in a euphoric mood. In his mind, he could already see himself standing on the big stage with his guitar, basking in the spotlight. He had so many ideas and plans. It wasn't easy for Melanie to confess to him what she had learned that morning, but she had to do it. When she told Danny everything, the first thing she noticed was his smile, a happy smile. It immediately lifted a heavy weight off Melanie's heart. Despite the unexpected timing, Danny was genuinely happy to know he was going to be a father. It's like a miracle of some kind, he said, holding Melanie close to him. How are you feeling now? The same, just a little nauseous in the mornings. Nothing has changed. They continued to wander silently through the city streets, still holding hands, lost in their own thoughts. Melanie watched Danny's face closely. He was clearly contemplating something important. There's a lot to consider, Danny finally said. This news changes everything. The whole world will be different now. We're parents, you know. We need to ensure our baby is happy, protected, and lacks nothing. The next morning, Danny informed Melanie of his decision. So, here's the plan. I won't sign a contract with the producer. I'll stay here. We're expecting a child, and we're building a new life together. I need to be by your side now. Initially, Melanie felt a weight lifted off her shoulders. Danny would stay with her, and with him, she wouldn't have to fear anything, to face problems and difficulties alone. However, after a few moments, Melanie realized what this decision meant for her beloved. She couldn't allow Danny to give up on his long-awaited dream. No, she shook her head. Don't even think about it. I'll manage. I'll stay with my parents for a while. You can't give up this opportunity. No way. I can handle it. It's only a short period of time. A year, 2, 3 at most, and then we'll be together again. You'll realize your dream and... No. Danny smiled and put his arm around Melanie's shoulders. I have to be there for you and our baby. And it's not just an obligation. I really want to be there. Missing out on such important moments in our child's life? No way. What about your career as a musician? What about the gigs, the fame? It's all childish. Danny waved his hand and tried to sound carefree. But Melanie knew that he was truly worried. The decision was clearly not easy for him. Danny was sacrificing a lot for her and their baby. Childish? This is your dream. It's foolish to turn down such an offer. I'll manage. Don't even think about it. Melanie had no idea how she would cope with everything alone, but she didn't want Danny to know. He had to fly to his dream. It remains to be seen if anything will work out. Danny shook his head. Success depends on many factors. The producer doesn't promise anything. He says we have to try. Maybe the project will be successful, maybe not. Give it a try. I'm sure you'll succeed. They say a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. Danny smiled warmly. And right now, we need money. Money and stability. We need to thoroughly prepare for the baby, and I don't want to miss the first few days of his life. That's something I can't catch up too later. So Danny decided to stay. He found a job at a law firm in his field. Even though he hated routine work, he was overjoyed when he got hired. "This company has great potential," Danny told Melanie. "The salary is good and there are opportunities for growth. Just what a family man needs." Melanie smiled, but her heart ached. It pained her that Danny had made such a sacrifice for her. However, she knew that his place wasn't in a stuffy office. His friends asked him back to revive the group, but Danny declined. Now he had different goals in life and didn't have time to rehearse for performances. "That stage is behind us, it's in the past," Danny explained to his friends. "I've entered a new phase of life. Sorry, guys." And then Nicky was born, and Danny turned out to be a wonderful father, caring, attentive and sensitive. When he held his son in his arms, his eyes shone with a special light. He hadn't done any more music since then. Why? He had to earn money for the family. The couple went through many challenges, sleepless nights with the baby, financial struggles and even relationship crises. But they managed to support each other and preserve their love. They both did a lot to make their family strong and harmonious. Things were going well for them. They bought an apartment, a car, and even a country house, so they wouldn't have to spend the entire summer in the stuffy city. And that's where Melanie was headed now, to the country house. She needed a place to relax and spend her time of her fake business trip. As she sat on the bus on her way to the country house, Melanie looked out the window pensively. "It's so strange not to trust Danny," she thought. However, his current behaviour suggested that Danny was seeing someone, and soon Melanie would have proof. Probably. But what to do then? Melanie didn't know that yet. The bus stopped at the right stop. Melanie got out. It was quiet here now, not like in summer. In summer there were children on bicycles everywhere, conversations and laughter coming from behind fences. But now it was as if everything had died out, even creepy. Melanie entered the yard. The house looked abandoned and lonely. The woman went up on the porch and pushed open the door. Strangely, it was open. Had they forgotten to lock last time? Strange, Danny wasn't usually so careless. But upon entering inside, Melanie realised at once that the house was inhabited. Someone had been here recently. There was an ashtray on the table, a cigarette still smoking in it. The chairs had been pushed aside, disordered, and someone's sweatshirt was lying on the bed. And then Melanie was struck by a thought that made her break into a sweat. Well, of course, how did she not guess it at once? Danny would not take his mistress to their apartment. There are neighbours. There are many witnesses. Of course, he would bring her to the cottage. The rooms were smoky, the scent of cigarettes mixed with the pungent odour of perfume. The fridge was full of food. It seems that they spend time here on a permanent basis. But this cottage that was bought for a vacation with a child. How cynical. But there was no one home now. Either they went to the store or decided to take a walk in the woods to enjoy a nice autumn day. Melanie walked briskly into the living room and didn't even recognise it at first. The table was pushed to the window. The centre of the room was cleared. For a drum set. From the stage, the instrument seems small, but in fact it takes up a lot of space. On the sofa by the window were 2 electric guitars, a white one and a black one with a brown stripe on the body. That's the one Melanie recognised. It was her husband's guitar. He hadn't touched it for a long time. The woman looked around in confusion. She had never expected to see this. She had thought the room would be filled with women's things. Suddenly, men's voices came from the street. Someone was coming back into the house. A moment later, the room was filled with people. Melanie knew them all. Stephen, Chris, Roy and Danny, of course. Danny! He was holding a big bag from the local store. "Ah, Melanie!" Danny couldn't believe his eyes. "What are you doing here? I've taken you to the train station this morning, haven't I?" "What am I doing here?" Melanie asked. "Oh, it's a very long story. And silly, it seems. I'll tell it later. But first, explain what's going on here." The other members of the band looked at each other and silently left the room to give the couple a chance to talk. Melanie and Danny stood opposite each other and were silent. The first to speak was Danny. "What can I say? My dream wouldn't let me go," he said, taking Melanie's hand. "Our band exists again, and we even have some excellent prospects. It all started about 3 months ago when Danny received a call from another well-known producer. He had come across their old clips on the internet and was highly impressed by their creativity. However, unlike the first producer, this one appreciated the band as a whole and wanted to learn about their current situation. After making inquiries, he discovered that the band no longer existed, but he saw great potential in the band, especially in the lead singer. Initially, Danny didn't understand what they wanted from him, but then he got a sense of déjà vu. A call from a producer, an offer that was impossible to refuse. Initially, the producer invited them to a show. The idea was to have relatively unknown musicians come to the studio, showcase their work, and receive advice from established stars. The aim was to transform their songs and give them a fresh sound. This required Danny to travel to rehearsals and performances, and that led to more frequent business trips. He used this excuse to explain his absence. The winners of the show will receive a contract from a well-known production centre. That's already 100% success, and we are already in the finals. Everything points to us being the winners. But even if we don't win, we have already gained recognition, showcased ourselves and attracted the attention of influential people. We have even been offered contracts. As things became more serious, Danny had to quit his job. The others did the same. They were already being paid for their participation in the show, so their families didn't notice any financial changes. We decided not to say anything to anyone just yet," Danny continued. "Initially we didn't believe in our success, but then we decided to surprise our families. The show is about to be aired. I hope we win. I wanted to bring joy to my family with a first-place victory and share the news of these changes when there is at least some certainty." Melanie looked at her husband and smiled, realizing that her suspicions occurred to be wrong. She suspected that Danny would confirm Corinne's theory that all husbands cheat, but Danny just resumed his journey to his dream. Yes, he had temporarily transformed into a serious lawyer and a responsible family man, but fate, as you can see, cannot be evaded. "I'm so happy for you." Melanie looked directly into her husband's eyes. "You have no idea how happy I am for you." "I know," Danny smiled and hugged his wife.
Hola, suscríbete a Historias Vitales para no perderte nuevas historias. Mi esposa había estado trabajando en su proyecto especial durante 4 meses ahora. No era su proyecto personal, pero ella era la persona principal y responsable de su éxito. El proyecto estaba diseñado para salvar a su empresa, Bixler Enterprises. Los últimos 4 meses habían sido difíciles porque se vio obligada a trabajar duro. Era importante tanto para ella como para la empresa. Había una buena posibilidad de que Bixler Enterprises quebrara si el proyecto no se completaba. Sara tenía una licenciatura de Albrecht y un MBA de Wharton. Era la más inteligente de la familia. Yo empecé a trabajar como mecánico de autos justo después de la secundaria y después de 21 años seguía siendo mecánico de autos. No me importaba porque me gustaba el trabajo y pagaba bien. Era suficiente para pagar la universidad de Sara y criar a 2 hijos. No vivíamos lujosamente, pero estábamos bien. Los niños ya se habían mudado, y las cosas iban bastante bien con nuestros ingresos. Sara quedó embarazada 3 meses después de casarnos a la edad de 18 años. Durante los primeros años de nuestro matrimonio, vivimos con mis padres. Ellos tenían una gran casa vacía ya que 4 de mis hermanos se habían mudado. Eso significaba que teníamos una niñera mientras Sara completaba sus primeros años de universidad. Debido a 2 embarazos, la carrera de 4 años le llevó 6 años completarla. Fue difícil, pero lo logró. Siempre tuve trabajo y nunca me faltó trabajo extra si lo necesitaba. Después de que Sara se graduó de Wharton, alquilamos nuestro propio lugar. Tuvo ofertas de trabajo de varias empresas grandes, pero todas requerían que nos mudáramos. A mí no me importaba, pero Sara quería quedarse cerca de casa. Por eso decidió trabajar en Bixler Enterprises. Pagaba bien, pero lo más importante, le daba responsabilidad y la oportunidad de avanzar. Sara era una empleada trabajadora y dedicada. La presentación es el jueves en el Hotel Thyssen en Filadelfia. Tomé unos días libres en el trabajo para ayudarla según fuera necesario. Al final, todo lo que logré fue hacerle algo de comer cuando llegaba a casa. No sabía nada sobre su trabajo, ni tampoco quería saber, los negocios corporativos de alto nivel me aburrían. Empresarios de Europa, Asia y América del Sur venían aquí, la empresa pagaba sus boletos de avión y proporcionaba habitaciones en el Hotel Thyssen mientras estaban aquí. Era caro como el infierno, y por algunas cosas que Sara había dicho, la empresa estaba sobreestimando sus finanzas. Su presentación era importante para ella, para la empresa y para más de 200 empleados. Hasta el martes por la noche, todo iba bien. Sara llegó a casa con un traje nuevo, un traje gris con una blusa blanca. Desplegó todo lo que necesitaba en la cama de la habitación de invitados. Cuando se trataba de la limpieza de la casa, ella era normal, pero cuando se trataba del trabajo, era meticulosa. No entendía por qué necesitaba sacar su ropa interior de lujo, pero no dije nada. Además de su traje para la presentación, tenía varios vestidos de cóctel lindos para eventos sociales antes y después del evento. Siempre había evitado tales eventos, pero me sentía obligado a ir con ella si ella quería que lo hiciera. Me agradeció la oferta, pero dijo que no era necesario. Todos los materiales y equipos que necesitaba estaban guardados ordenadamente en el maletero de su Volvo. Antes de salir del trabajo, ella misma conducía el coche para asegurarse de que todo estuviera en perfectas condiciones. Tenía todo el día miércoles para prepararse y toda la noche del miércoles para socializar con sus invitados. Sara era tan buena en lo que hacía que sentía que habría sido mejor si simplemente me hubiera mantenido alejado de ella. Finalmente, había terminado. Lo había revisado y vuelto a revisar todo. Todo lo que necesitaba ahora era una ducha caliente y una buena noche de sueño. Supongo que mi error fue que empecé a revisar sus cosas después de que Sara comenzara a ducharse. Pensé que estaba ayudando, pero resultó ser lo contrario. Estaba moviendo cosas en la cama cuando un pequeño sobre blanco cayó del bolsillo lateral de su bolso de maquillaje. Una carta de una farmacia, pero no del tipo que solemos usar. Dentro había 10 pastillas. No tenía idea de qué era, Pren, y las instrucciones eran confusas. Si es necesario, tomar una pastilla y luego una segunda pastilla 12 horas después. Pensé que podría ser algo que ella había conseguido para la ansiedad o los nervios, pero las instrucciones no tenían sentido. La receta estaba escrita a su nombre el lunes. Volví a poner el sobre en su lugar mientras ella terminaba de ducharse. Decidí que quería saber más sobre Pren antes de contarle sobre ello. Por supuesto, si lo mencionaba, significaría que estaba revisando sus cosas. Odio los dilemas. Mientras Sara se preparaba para dormir, fui a nuestro ordenador doméstico y busqué. 10 minutos después, me uní a mi esposa bajo las sábanas. Pasé toda la noche despierto, preguntándome por qué mi esposa había recogido una receta para la píldora del día después, especialmente después de que me hicieran una vasectomía hace 10 años. A la mañana siguiente, me levanté temprano, pero no estaba descansado. Di un largo paseo, esperando que despejara mi mente. Me dirigí hacia casa con reticencia, temiendo lo que podría hacer o decir cuando llegara allí. Mi hijo Joe se unió a la Marina después de la escuela secundaria y estaba en su primer año en San Diego. Nuestra hija Gloria se casó con su amor de la infancia el año pasado y acababa de mudarse a Dallas. Eso dejaba solo a Sara y a mí. Echaba de menos a los niños, pero esperaba envejecer con mi esposa. Ella era la única mujer que me había interesado, y ahora todo estaba. Si Sara estaba teniendo una aventura, lo ocultaba bien. Por supuesto, nunca la vigilé. Nunca miré sus correos electrónicos o llamadas telefónicas. No tenía razones para hacerlo. No tenía forma de saber qué estaba haciendo en el trabajo o después del trabajo. Confiaba en ella completamente. Ion, ¿dónde demonios has estado? ¿Quieres huevos o algo? No, solo café. No me sentía con muchas ganas de hablar. ¿Qué pasa, cariño? Solo son 3 días. Puedes venir si quieres, pero te aburrirás como una ostra. No, realmente no quiero ir, pero odio dejarte sola. Me preocupo cuando no estás aquí. Es muy dulce, querido, pero estará bien. No voy a salir del hotel en todo este tiempo. Pasaré la mayor parte del día asegurándome de que la sala de conferencias esté lista, y esta noche tendré una agradable charla con nuestros posibles clientes. Mañana, probablemente ni siquiera tendré la oportunidad de ir al baño. Llegaré a casa lo más temprano posible el viernes, te prometo un gran fin de semana si sabes a lo que me refiero. Todo eso suena bien, pero no puedes culparme por preocuparme. Soy un mecánico de autos, y tengo una esposa hermosa y exitosa. A veces tengo la sensación de que estás menos interesada en mejorar nuestra situación familiar que en avanzar en tu carrera. Detente, maldita sea, Ion. Siempre he respetado lo que haces para ganarte la vida y nunca he insinuado lo contrario. Criaste a 2 grandes niños y me pusiste a través de la universidad. Eres un gran esposo, un gran padre y un buen proveedor, y nunca olvides eso. Terminé mi café mientras ella recogía la mesa. ¿Quieres que te llame? No, no es una buena idea. Tendré el móvil apagado, y voy a apagar el teléfono de la habitación por la noche para poder dormir. Te llamaré siempre que pueda. La ayudé a cargar el coche, era tan meticulosa con eso como con todo lo demás. Trabajando, le llevaría 3 horas llegar al Hotel Lysen. Me quedé en el porche y la vi marcharse. No me molesté en preguntarle por las pastillas. Pasé el resto de la mañana en el porche. No recuerdo haberme preocupado tanto como ahora. Me sentía pequeño e insignificante. Me sentía fuera de mi liga. Era un tipo de pueblo con un trabajo mediocre y una esposa exitosa. Era una combinación equivocada. Debería haberlo notado antes. Me sentía estúpido. El mejor traje que tenía era una chaqueta azul y un par de pantalones. Al menos tenía algunas corbatas, aunque tenían 10 años de antigüedad. Acababa de terminar de vestirme cuando sonó el teléfono fijo. Oye, cariño, solo quería avisarte de que llegué bien. ¿Tuviste un buen viaje? Supongo que el tráfico no estaba demasiado denso. Estuvo bien. Te llamaré esta noche. Ahora tengo que irme. Estoy en la habitación 714, Sara. Puedo estar en casa de mis padres o en la de mis hermanos esta noche si quieres llamarme a mi móvil. De acuerdo. Suena el teléfono móvil. Te quiero, tengo que irme. Me tomé mi tiempo para llegar a Filadelfia. No fui directo al Lysen, primero me detuve y compré un filete con queso. Prometí hacer una larga noche. No estaba seguro de qué iba a hacer. Estacioné en el garaje del hotel y simplemente esperé. Tarde o temprano, tenía que entrar en el hotel. Simplemente no podía decidir cuándo hacerlo. El sonido de mi teléfono celular me ayudó a tomar mi decisión. Ion, solo quería avisarte de que todo se ha arreglado. Ahora voy a bajar para encontrarme con algunas personas y cenar. No olvidaste nada, ¿verdad? No, todo está bien. Tengo todo en mi habitación para mañana. ¿Necesitas algo? No, Ion, relájate. Voy a apagar mi teléfono. Te llamaré mañana por la mañana. ¿De acuerdo? Ríe, diviértete. No es divertido, Ion, es trabajo. No parecía estar demasiado fuera de lugar. El vestíbulo, el restaurante y las salas de conferencias estaban llenos de gente, así que pude pasar desapercibido. Había un folleto pequeño y bonito que mostraba el diseño de todas las habitaciones del hotel. Me paseé por las diferentes habitaciones y me detuve en las paredes, mirando alrededor entre la multitud. No tenía ni idea de qué haría si Sara me veía. Lo averiguaría si y cuando eso sucediera. Encontré un tablero de eventos que enumeraba todas las habitaciones que estaban siendo utilizadas por los diversos grupos. Bixler Enterprises no tenía habitaciones disponibles para el miércoles por la noche. Esto me pareció interesante. Sara había dicho que no iba a salir del hotel, pero ahora no estaba tan seguro de eso. Había 3 comedores, familiar, informal y de alta cocina. A Sara no le gustaba mucho cenar con niños, así que fui primero al comedor informal. Solo me llevó 5 minutos asegurarme de que no estaba allí. Tuve mejor suerte en el salón gourmet, era una acogedora mesita encajada en la esquina, el tipo de mesa que la gente reserva para tener un encuentro privado. Sara llevaba un vestido de cóctel negro con un escote pronunciado y perlas, se veía elegante y su acompañante parecía apreciarlo. Conocía a algunas personas con las que trabajaba Sara y él no era una de ellas. Me resultaba familiar, pero no había forma de que pudiera recordarlo. Había muchas sillas libres, así que no tuve problemas para cruzar la sala. Había velas y pequeños candelabros de cristal en las mesas. Apagué la mía y le dije al camarero que me molestaba por el glaucoma. Pedí el plato de pollo de siempre y me acomodé. El camarero me sirvió el café por tercera vez. Disculpe, el tipo en la mesa de enfrente me parece muy familiar. ¿Sabes quién es? Sí, ese es Malcolm Eugene Foote. Es miembro del Consejo Municipal, se espera que se postule para el Congreso en los próximos años. ¿Es esa su esposa con él? Es muy bonita. No, esta es la primera vez que la veo. Siempre usa esa mesa para señoras especiales, si me entiende. Simplemente le sonreí y pedí la cuenta. Nunca había visto a Sara tan sensual con un hombre antes. Parecía captar cada palabra que decía, como si fuera Dios o algo así. No estaban haciendo nada inapropiado, pero tampoco era platónico ni profesional. Cuando me fui, estaban terminando su segunda botella de vino. Ahora entendía por qué se había llevado su lencería elegante. Me acomodé en una esquina del vestíbulo para que no me vieran. 10 minutos después, salieron del restaurante. Ella le tomaba la mano mientras caminaban por el vestíbulo hacia el ascensor. Observé cuidadosamente los indicadores de piso. Que el ascensor se detuviera en el tercer piso era una buena señal, significaba que no lo había llevado a su habitación. Era una mala señal cuando el ascensor no llegaba al 7º piso, significaba que ella fue a su habitación. Por si acaso me equivocaba en algo, me senté en el vestíbulo y observé el ascensor durante 1 hora. La gente entraba y salía, pero Sara no estaba entre ellos. Saqué mi maleta vacía del coche y me dirigí al mostrador de recepción. Aunque podía demostrar que era su esposo, me costó trabajo conseguir una tarjeta llave. Se dieron después de llamar a la habitación, pero nadie respondió. Finalmente, estaba en camino a la habitación 714 con la tarjeta llave. Ni siquiera encendí las luces al principio, simplemente me senté en la oscuridad de la habitación durante más de 1 hora. No fue difícil asegurarme de que no regresara a la habitación. Primero, empacé todas sus ropas y pertenencias personales. No dejé nada atrás. Revisé el paquete de Preven, todavía quedaban 10 pastillas en el tocador. De manera muy ordenada, estaban todos los artículos que necesitaría para su presentación al día siguiente. Comencé a llenar la maleta. Había 24 carpetas promocionales especialmente encuadernadas y otras 20 carpetas regulares, todas ellas fueron a la maleta. Un proyector digital fue lo siguiente, seguido de una computadora portátil. Tomé su bolso y su celular, que había dejado en la habitación. Todo lo que tenía consigo era un bolso de mano y probablemente un tubo de lápiz labial. Di una vuelta por la habitación tan cuidadosamente como lo hizo ella para asegurarme de no perder nada. Una vez satisfecho, dejé las llaves del coche y mi anillo de bodas en el tocador. Aparte de esos dos objetos, la habitación estaba completamente vacía. El ascensor se dirigió directamente al estacionamiento, no tuve problemas para llevar 2 maletas, y 20 minutos después, estaba en la autopista rumbo al norte. Pasaban las 3 de la madrugada, no tenía idea de que había pasado tanto tiempo. 1 hora o 2 después, sonó mi teléfono celular, la identificación de llamadas mostraba el número del Listen. ¿Ion? Sí, ¿dónde estás? Estaré en casa pronto. Eso fue todo lo que dije. Hubo silencio en el otro extremo de la línea. Los vendedores tienen un viejo dicho, el primero que habla pierde. Pareció una eternidad antes de que ella hablara. Ion, lo siento. No preguntó nada y simplemente colgó. Apagué mi teléfono, era obvio que había regresado a su habitación. Más tarde ese día, tenía que dar una presentación que salvaría a su empresa y le daría un ascenso. Metí las maletas en el desván del garaje. Sara nunca iba allí y nunca pensó en buscar algo allí. Por supuesto, en este punto, estoy bastante seguro de que no importaba. Primero, recogí todas mis ropas y pertenencias personales. La mayoría de los hombres tienen sus propias herramientas, generalmente es un requisito para el trabajo. Pasé por la tienda, cargué las mías en el Subaru y recogí mi último cheque de pago. Para entonces, los bancos ya estaban abiertos, no tuve que hacer ninguna manipulación financiera complicada. Simplemente retiré todo el dinero de mis cuentas. Almorcé en Hagerstown, Maryland. Tenía suficiente dinero para vivir durante unos años, pero sabía que estaría buscando trabajo muy pronto. Sara y yo éramos parecidos en eso de que a ambos nos encantaba trabajar. La voy a extrañar. Pasé un par de horas en las cuevas del Uray y alquilé una habitación cerca de Whitewell. No tenía idea de qué iba a hacer. Era sábado, y me encontré sentado en el acuario de Chattanooga, observando la naturaleza que nunca había visto antes. Pasé unas horas simplemente relajándome y decidí que era un buen lugar para estar. Compré un pase anual para el acuario y, para la hora de la cena, tenía un lugar donde quedarme. Era un remolque móvil en el parque, pero estaba amueblado y era económico. No necesitaba mucho. La primera cosa que haría el lunes por la mañana sería conseguir un trabajo. Un buen hombre de mantenimiento siempre puede conseguir un trabajo, especialmente si está dispuesto a trabajar duro. Podría permanecer discreto hasta que fuera el momento de renovar mi licencia de conducir o las etiquetas del coche. Me preocuparé por eso cuando llegue el momento. El domingo por la tarde, llamé a Gloria. Me sentí obligado a informarle sobre lo que estaba sucediendo, pero Sara ya se lo había contado. Fue bastante franca con Gloria sobre lo que había pasado. Dijo que había engañado, que la sorprendí, que me fui y que ella perdió su trabajo. Me sentí mal porque ella perdió su trabajo, pero ese era el precio que tenía que pagar. Le pedí a Gloria que le dijera a Josh lo que estaba sucediendo la próxima vez que hablara con él. También le dije que la llamaría aproximadamente una vez al mes para verificar cómo iban las cosas. No le dije dónde estaba. Para el mediodía del día siguiente, tenía un trabajo. En realidad, estaba a poca distancia del parque de remolques, con el Waffle House a mitad de camino. ¿Qué más podría querer un hombre? No sé cómo manejaron el papeleo, pero me estaban pagando $20 por hora sin hacer preguntas. Estaba feliz, y ellos también. Ni siquiera tendría que tocar el dinero que traje conmigo. Unos 2 meses después, Gloria me informó que Sara se había mudado de la casa y estaba viviendo con sus padres. Gloria no sabía nada más, pero estaba feliz de que estuviera estable y le estuviera yendo bien. Josh me llamó desde San Diego solo para informarme que iba a hacer un crucero. Era técnico en aviónica en un portaaviones. Intentó explicar qué hacía exactamente, pero estaba más allá de mi comprensión. Nunca supe mucho sobre cosas técnicas. Ambos tuvieron cuidado de no decir nada malo sobre su madre. Aprecié eso. Después de eso, todo siguió como siempre. Comencé a hablar con Gloria al menos semanalmente. Josh y yo comenzamos a enviar correos electrónicos regularmente. Gloria hablaba regularmente con Sara, pero decía muy poco sobre lo que estaba haciendo o dónde estaba. Nunca presenté la solicitud de divorcio, y parece que Sara tampoco lo hizo. Tengo una licencia de conducir de Tennessee y las etiquetas en el Subaru. Comencé a frecuentar un bar local un par de veces al mes y tuve encuentros casuales. 2 mujeres se alternaban como mis compañeras nocturnas regulares. No buscaban compromisos, y yo tampoco. Parecía funcionar bien para todos nosotros. La vida era buena. Eso fue hace mucho tiempo, y gradualmente olvidé a Sara. Con el tiempo, el Subaru comenzó a darme problemas. Había olvidado cuánto tiempo había pasado. Tenía más de 200,000 millas. Estaba reflexionando sobre esto con una jarra de cerveza un día cuando me di cuenta de que habían pasado casi 5 años desde que me fui de casa. Mantuve un contacto cercano con ambos hijos. Gloria ya tenía 2 hijos propios en este momento y quería que los visitara. Josh casi se casó con una mujer tailandesa, pero en el último momento se negó. Por lo general, trabajaba 6 días a la semana y usaba el domingo para recuperarme del sábado por la noche. No había ninguna buena razón para que alguien llamara a la puerta de mi remolque a las 6 de la mañana de un viernes. Su grosería fue recompensada por un hombre medio desnudo abriendo la puerta. Los calzoncillos del día son repugnantes, y la dama en la puerta, juzgando por la expresión en su rostro, estuvo de acuerdo conmigo. Ella apartó la mirada, pero su compañero no parecía impresionado. Norm habría usado pantalones, pero en un momento como este, los invitados me molestaron. Estamos buscando a John Terrell. No los conozco. Me llamo David Simmons, y esta es mi esposa Mara. Tenemos un problema y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Lo siento mucho, no trabajo a altas horas de la noche. Si necesitan algo relacionado con su auto, tendrán que ir a la tienda. Esto provocó varias miradas en blanco y finalmente una respuesta. No tiene nada que ver con tu trabajo, es más un problema personal. ¿Podemos entrar? El interior del remolque lucía desordenado, rara vez tenía invitados, así que rara vez lo limpiaba. Incluso mis novias insistían en que fuéramos a su lugar. Hagan como en su casa, déjenme ponerme los pantalones enseguida. Al entrar en el dormitorio, dejé la puerta abierta solo para mostrarles lo hospitalario que soy. También me puse una camisa. ¿Les gustaría tomar café? Solo tomará unos 10 minutos. Aparté algunas cosas del sofá para que pudieran sentarse. No hubo respuesta a la pregunta del café. Tenemos una hija adoptiva de 4 años y otra de 2 que necesita un trasplante de médula ósea, y esperamos que nos puedas ayudar. Estamos dispuestos a pagarte si es necesario. ¿Con mi médula ósea? No, queremos usarla y estamos dispuestos a compensarte por cualquier inconveniente. Creo que quieren comprarla. Estaba actuando como un listillo, y de repente me di cuenta de ello. Estas personas eran serias, tenían un problema real y estaban buscando ayuda. Lo siento mucho, no quise interrumpir. Por favor, continúen. Nuestra mejor oportunidad de encontrar un donante es un familiar cercano. Eres nuestra mejor esperanza. Mira esto. No quiero ser un grosero, pero creo que se equivocaron de persona. ¿Cuándo nació su hija? Cumplirá 5 años en julio. Marche Simmons habló por primera vez, y sonó sincera. Odio ser el portador de malas noticias, pero me hice una vasectomía hace 15 años. No hay forma de que pueda ser su padre. ¿Por qué tu nombre estaba en el certificado de nacimiento? No puedo responder eso, tal vez deberían preguntarle a su madre. Esa afirmación fue recibida con silencio. Sentí pena por estas personas, pero no sabía cómo ayudarles. ¿Cuál es el nombre de la madre? Sarah Lise Terrell. No encontraba las palabras. Tal vez no debería haber tomado esas malditas pastillas de ella, por supuesto, entonces esas personas no tendrían una hija en absoluto. Todo lo que pensaba que había superado el dolor, y aquí está de nuevo, viejos recuerdos de mi esposa teniendo relaciones sexuales con ese maldito político de Filadelfia. Estaba empezando a olvidarlo todo, y ahora estaba de vuelta. Maldita sea. Ahora entiendo y pido disculpas por mi grosería e insensibilidad. Haré todo lo que esté en mi poder para ayudarles. En primer lugar, porque no puede Sara hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Médicamente, no puede. ¿Por qué no? Es madre, tiene que ser una donante adecuada. Ella es una donante adecuada, pero está demasiado enferma. Los médicos se negaron siquiera a considerar utilizarla. ¿Enferma de qué? Está muriendo de insuficiencia hepática. Le quedan menos de 6 meses de vida. Esto no tiene sentido. Siempre ha estado perfectamente sana. Además, no creo que un hígado enfermo le impida donar médula ósea. El hospital no aceptará su firma en el formulario de consentimiento. ¿Estás diciendo que hay algo mal en su cabeza? Ambos me miraron en silencio, sabían la respuesta, pero no querían decirlo. En ese momento, no quería que se sintieran aún más incómodos. Hace 10 minutos, no me importaban, pero ahora sentía que tenía que protegerlos y ayudarlos. ¿Cómo sucedió esto? ¿Podría alguno de mis hijos ayudar? Quizás, pero pensamos que eras nuestra mejor esperanza. ¿Por qué no van tras su padre, su verdadero padre? Pensamos que eras tú. No tenemos ni idea de quién más podría ser. Sara no nos dijo nada sobre otro posible padre. De hecho, ella no estaba en condiciones de explicar nada, agregó Mara. Obtuvimos la mayoría de nuestra información de la agencia de adopción. Tuve que preparar café y hacer pis, permítanme un momento. Dejé a mis invitados sentados mientras preparaba el café. Solo tomó unos minutos. Mientras se preparaba, fui al baño, algo que necesitaba hacer urgentemente. Traté de ser discreto, ya había avergonzado lo suficiente a Mara. ¿Dónde viven? En Westchester, Pensilvania. Les haré una oferta. Si les digo quién es el verdadero padre de su hija, deben prometerme que lo perseguirán sin descanso hasta obtener lo que desean. ¿De qué estás hablando? El padre de su hija es un político prominente en Pensilvania. Por supuesto, negará todo y probablemente les proporcionará documentos legales para detener sus esfuerzos. Si acuerdan presionar lo suficiente para que él admita que la niña es suya, podrán avergonzarlo y obligarlo a hacerse un trasplante de médula ósea. Eso es lo que quieren, ¿verdad? Sí, claro, pero ¿cómo hacemos eso? No lo sé. Soy mecánico. Trabajo con metal para ganarme la vida. Creo que la mejor manera sería utilizar la televisión, la radio y los periódicos. Los políticos harán cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. ¿Tienen amigos que puedan ayudar? Bueno, ahora ambos estaban sonriendo. Debo haber dicho algo que les dio esperanza. Creo que podemos hacer esto. ¿Quién demonios es él? Malcolm Eugene Foote. Se postula para el Senado de los Estados Unidos. Apuesto a que hará cualquier cosa para evitar una mala publicidad. El café estaba listo, pero David y Marshen no podían esperar para llegar a casa. Antes de irse, les dije cómo ponerse en contacto con Gloria y Josh en caso de que los necesitaran. Estaba seguro de que ayudarían. También les pedí que me dijeran dónde estaba Sara. Probablemente estaría en Pensacola antes de que ellos regresaran a Westchester. Me corté el pelo y compré una camisa nueva. Sara era una tramposa que arruinó mi vida, pero aún así quería lucir bien cuando la viera. Era otro remolque, pero esta vez era un bonito doble nuevo. Allí estaba su Volvo con una llanta desinflada y un parabrisas roto. La mujer que abrió la puerta no era Sara, parecía que la habían empapado fuerte y la habían dejado empapada. Tenía al menos 45, tal vez 50, y debió haber tenido una vida difícil. La falta de maquillaje no ayudaba, y simplemente se veía horrible. No tuve la oportunidad de abrir la boca. Caray, si no es John Terrell. Nunca esperé verte aquí. Tuve que usar la vieja línea, me estás poniendo en desventaja. Sherry Hart. Pasa, entra. ¿Quieres una cerveza? No, pero gracias. Estoy aquí para ver a Sarah. Sherry cruzó la habitación y se detuvo en el buffet del comedor. Aquí está, John. Mírala todo lo que quieras. Su mano señalaba una urna de latón que estaba en el centro del buffet vacío. Supongo que llegué demasiado tarde. No me moví, solo me quedé mirando el contenedor frente a mí. ¿Puedo tomar una cerveza ahora? Sarah se mudó a Pensacola después de dar a su bebé en adopción. Compró el remolque con el dinero que recibió de Bixler Enterprises después de que la despidieron. Tenía una participación en las ganancias, 401k, y vacaciones y días de enfermedad. Eventualmente, consiguió un trabajo en una fábrica local de prendas de vestir donde trabajaba en el departamento de envíos. Allí fue donde conoció a Sherry. Sherry alquilaba una habitación de Sarah. Cada centavo que Sarah ganaba iba para el alcohol. Empezó con vino y gradualmente pasó a bebidas más fuertes, las más baratas. Eventualmente, perdió su trabajo debido a su alcoholismo y se vio obligada a usar sus ahorros. Nunca salió con nadie ni salió a ningún lado. Sherry se quedó con ella, pagó sus servicios públicos y compró alimentos que Sarah no comía. Le llevó más de 3 años quitarse la vida. Increíblemente, ella tenía un testamento y me dejó un doble remolque y un Volvo. Sherry explicó que Sarah estaba tan angustiada por lo que había hecho que simplemente se rindió. No intentó evitar el embarazo ni siquiera terminarlo. La adopción se había arreglado meses antes de que naciera el bebé. Nunca volvió a trabajar, excepto en los trabajos clandestinos que hacía mal. Sherry dijo que Sarah no parecía tener ambición ni propósito en la vida. Sarah hablaba mucho de mí pero tenía miedo de intentar contactarme. Gloria le dio mi número, pero nunca me llamó. Era como si su aventura de una noche la hubiera lastimado más a ella que a mí. Estuve allí durante 2 semanas y luego vendí el remolque de Sherry por $1 y obtuve $3,000 por el Volvo. 2 días después, estaba en Westchester visitando a mis nuevos amigos David y Marche. Malcolm Eugene Foote resistió al principio, pero David y Marche lo presionaron hasta que cedió. Insistió en pruebas de ADN, que demostraron que era el padre. Para salvar la cara, más o menos lo obligaron a someterse a un trasplante de médula ósea, que fue exitoso. La carrera política y la vida familiar de Malcolm no dejaron una impresión favorable. Su caída en las encuestas fue tan rápida que el partido lo reemplazó por otro candidato unos meses antes de las elecciones. Su esposa solicitó el divorcio y fue muy pública al respecto. Sarah y yo estamos viajando ahora a Dallas para ver a Gloria y a mis nietos. No sé cuánto tiempo mantendré a Sarah conmigo, probablemente hasta que tenga a alguien.